Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to episode 8 of Might Help, Can't Hurt, Conversations with Leaders, Doers, and Friends. And today I am here with Professor Anthony Kessel, who is clearly in witness protection and just kind of slightly shading his face so that we don't identify him, though we have given away your name now. So I don't know that that's going to work. How you doing? How long's it been? I was trying to remember. Was it last year's 3P conference, or when did we last see each other?
We had well, first of all, good evening from London, and it's great to be here with you. And yeah, I'm sorry about the backdrop. It's due to the lighting in my room. I think we last chatted, it wasn't the 3P conference. You and I had a conversation about my 3 Principles fiction book for children.
That's right.
And I think that was a few months ago.
The Edie Marble books.
The Edie Marble books, exactly. I think that was the last time we touched base, yeah.
Yeah. And how are you guys doing? I mean, how are you dealing with everything?
Well, it's been, a momentous period globally, nationwide. Everything from personal to global has been absolutely momentous. As you know, I work in public health and in global public health, and it's been an extraordinary period. I mean, never has public health and global public health been so much in the limelight. Good. I don't think it was there in Ebola, it was there in swine flu, but never to this degree.
Yeah.
So it's been an extraordinary period, professionally, personally, family-wise, and also through observation of one's understanding of how the mind works and 3 principles and how that pertains to all that we're all currently experiencing.
Now, okay, so last night, I was talking with the fam. We were all around. They did a really cool graduation 2020 thing, which all the networks carried over here, and LeBron James and Obama gave the commencement speech, and it was kind of cool. And we were talking afterwards about, because everyone here is getting bored with the rules.
Yeah.
And yeah. The arguments, and I'm saying arguments like logical arguments, not like literally shouting arguments, so I guess sometimes they probably are that, well, this science seems to say that, and that science seems to say that. So even if we're trying to do this based on science, which science? And no, you must always be having to reckon with that in the role of sort of looking at global health and having to make at times policy recommendations. I'm sure various times in your career you had to do that. How do you sift fact from fiction, good science from bad science, relevant science from like if we're sitting there in our own house arguing over it, how the hell do you guys do it?
I think the truth of that is that we're living in great uncertainty. And for me, that's something that brings understanding of the 3 principles very much to the table, because it's huge uncertainty for all of us. It's uncertainty for political leaders in this country. It's uncertainty for us working in public health and science. And it's complete uncertainty for you, for me, for our children living at home and not knowing what the future holds. I have indeed been involved at a very high level in steering, guiding, informing political leaders. And the truth in this situation is nobody knows what's going to work best. I'm afraid it's hard to hear, but nobody knows. The scientists don't know. All they're doing is looking at predictions of different situations, and the politicians don't know. But there's a certain amount of misleading that goes on. I think in all Western countries, certainly in our country, when I hear the repetitive mantra from political leaders that what we're doing is guided by the science, it's not true. It's not true. It's informed by the science, but ultimately the decisions they're making in California, Michael, in the USA, in the UK, in Sweden, and they're making different kinds of decisions, are at best informed by the science, but they're ultimately political decisions. I've been in the COBRA meetings, the highest level security meetings in the UK, and you can witness that. And in some ways, that's understandable. The politicians accept the data, the suggestions, the recommendations, as uncertain as those all are, but ultimately have to make political decisions, and they'll make different decisions in different localities. Yours are different to what's going on in the UK, and the UK is vastly different, say, to Sweden. So everybody's living in uncertainty. And, I found it fascinating to explore to look at, to observe what living in uncertainty means for people. Now, I don't know how the politicians are dealing with that all the time. It's somehow easier to get a take on it in relation to friends and family because it feels unprecedented. Now, we know from our three principles of understanding of how the mind works that we're actually living in uncertainty all the time. All the time. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the future, and we fool ourselves into a different kind of thinking to create that false notion of security. But I think, as far as I can remember, it's never been as in your face, as you like, as it is now. Everybody is living in uncertainty. Am I going to catch the disease? If I do catch the disease, am I going to have it really severely? Am I going to experience mortality in my family? Am I going to have it mildly? And the fear and insecurity that creates is huge. And I'm sure we can all see it around us. And it's been interesting to observe if people have a three principles understanding of how the mind works, does that help in navigating that uncertainty? My sense is it does, and it can. And one can see when people don't perhaps have that understanding, the escalation of fear and insecurity, the panic that can ensue, the heightened anxiety that results.
So you've used the phrase a few times, the three principles, and obviously I'm sitting here nodding in agreement because I write books about it. But for anyone listening who doesn't know what we're talking about in that sense, because this isn't necessarily, at that audience, what if you were going to sort of nutshell what that means to you? What is the three principles understanding, and how does it help?
Well, to me, as I've learned over the last 5 to 10 years or so, three principles understanding is an understanding of how the mind works and how we experience our psychological experience of life. And if you like, the myth that we have a psychological experience that is a direct relation to the outside world. And what the three principles understanding has taught me or helped me see is that we don't. We live in a thought-generated experience of reality. We create and live in that thought-generated experience of reality. It's not the inclement weather out there. It's not the annoying boss that is causing me to feel unhappy, sad, miserable. It's not even truly the person with coronavirus who might be jogging down the street. It's my thinking about about the jogger in the street or the annoying boss that is responsible for my feeling, and those feelings of anxiety and insecurity that people have. And I, as we've understood the three principles, it's not just about thought. It's the principles of consciousness and the principles of mind as well. But that outsourcing of our well-being that happens when we don't have a three principles understanding of the world and how the mind works, that outsourcing, by that I mean the feeling that we do live in a direct experience, therefore we have to constantly spend our time trying to change the outside world in order to feel better. When you can escape from that a little bit and truly understand that, it creates a different experience. It enables, or certainly I've found, it enables us to navigate the terrain and navigate what comes to pass in life with greater grace and understanding.
Which isn't to say, and I'm obviously I'm sort of clarifying as much for somebody listening as I am for myself, but to a certain extent for myself, it's not saying there isn't a virus. It's just saying that our experience of living in a world where there's a virus is completely made of thought.
It's absolutely saying that. We had data just yesterday for the first time in the UK. Then actually the number of people in the UK, in England rather, at the moment, who have coronavirus is 1 in 400. So it's tiny. I could walk down my street and not experience a single person who has coronavirus at the moment. But the level of anxiety and panic, which results from a different kind of understanding, is very huge. So the virus is out there. But of course, the reality is there's uncertainty about our health all the time. Yeah. Nobody knows. You don't know. I don't know any family members whether tomorrow, next week's going to yield some news about ill health, a cancer, anything like that. We don't know. That exists all the time. It's been brought into sharp relief by this pandemic. And I think also heightened hugely by television and social media experience that brings it into people's minds more acutely, so that that fear of that thing out there is even greater. And I think without that understanding that that those feelings are generated by your thinking about them rather than the actual virus, I think it's more difficult. And I'm not surprised to see the data on the level of mental health problems in children and adolescents in particular. I can see it in adults with the anxiety and the panic, but in children and adolescents who are really struggling with this. I don't know about the States, but we've had data recently about 1 in 4 young people having significant mental health problems through this pandemic. That is huge. And it certainly made me think, if those children and young people had an understanding of how the mind, the 3 principles, understanding of how the mind works, would their experience of this situation be different? I don't know, but my inclination of feeling is yes, it probably would. Yeah.
And that's what we've talked about in terms of why you're writing the books, why this sort of mystery series that is doing a little bit more than solving more mysteries than just what happened to the missing clues or whatever. I can't remember. I only read the first one. But so I've got to go back for a sec, or I want to go back for a sec. So one of the things I saw in your LinkedIn bio, it's just funny, I've known you for ages, I never read your bio, but was that you're a medical ethicist. And it struck me for a long time that what the politicians are doing is a variation on the trolley problem, where there's a trolley, it's heading for somebody. If I can't remember the actual original problem, but essentially, do you sacrifice the one for the many? Do you allow the trolley to perish and save everybody else, or do you? And it seems to me that's the game we're playing. As for you, and this is like, you can just lie to me if you need to, but like for you as somebody whose job it is to make recommendations, to attempt to guide policy, knowing that nobody knows the right answer. I get how you can be with that in terms of how this understanding helps you navigate that in yourself. But where do you go? If because I can't imagine you just, and tell me again if I'm wrong, I can't imagine you just go to a politician and go, yeah, we don't know, whatever your best guess is, go for it, bud.
Well, I think you follow truth, and you follow your own heart, and you follow your own feelings. Yeah. And the best you can do is show up and be present, especially in those particularly high level and security clearance required meetings. And you present the information as it is, but you have to do so in the knowledge that whatever advice and information you're presenting may not be what's followed. Now, that's ultimately becomes not my decision. I'm not a politician. I'm a scientist and public health leader. So you can only go as far. That's not to say that's not troubling. It can be very difficult at times, but I've not found any other way to be able to navigate that except to be able to speak openly, speak the truth, and say what you feel. If that is ultimately not followed, then in some ways that's taken out of your court slightly. Occasionally you have somebody who will resign by virtue of that, a senior health official or a scientist. But that's out of your court. But I think it gets much more complicated than that as well. In this country, for instance, my sense is it's been the case that we were slow off the mark because we were the politicians, at least, were very much involved with Brexit and winning a new election, and that I was off the ball. And we were slow to go into lockdown. And we missed the chance to take an approach you may be familiar with. That someone like Sweden has taken a very different approach from the very beginning. Their approach has been protect the vulnerable, protect the elderly, but otherwise carry on with business, keep the economy alive with rules and social distancing rules, but everything's more or less carried on working there. And it's been extraordinary to see what's happened there. There is good social responsibility there, but they're taking a different path. And I heard just last week that in the Stockholm province, for instance, which is about 3 million people, they've got 25 to 40% of the people have had coronavirus. Now, in California, where you are, in the US, in the UK, it's tiny in comparison because we've gone into lockdown. So the moment we come out of lockdown, you've got everyone susceptible, essentially. But other countries a few other countries took a different approach from the beginning. And it seems like now, given their mortality rates have not been worse, they've been better, in fact, that with hindsight, that might have been a pragmatic, bold decision to make, one that was against the grain at the time, and they were pilloried a little bit in that country at the time, but a bold one to make. But unfortunately, for the countries that didn't make that decision early on, we're now in a situation where it's politically almost impossible to backtrack. Once you've gone into lockdown and mitigation and the ways that we're all dealing with it, it's very hard to politically change direction and say, well, now we're going into a different kind of approach.
Now, why? Okay, so Nina and I were talking last night, and she was asking me how herd immunity worked. And I started to try and be all intelligent and stuff, and then went, I have no freaking idea. I mean, why don't we have, if herd immunity is a real thing, why do we still get flu? Because, I mean, flu's been out for a while, right? And do we have herd immunity to flu? I probably a stupid question, but it's the one I got.
We don't have herd immunity to influenza virus, which is what causes true influenza, true flu. We don't have that because it mutates and changes every year. Right. So you will have it if you've had the influenza in one season, you'll be immune to it for that season, but the virus mutates and a new version exists the next year. That's why you need a new vaccine each year. And that may be the case for coronavirus as well. A new vaccine is required each year. Nobody knows yet. Right. But you will get herd immunity for measles and polio and other viruses that don't work in the same way. And nobody knows what level is required for, it's different for different viruses. For coronavirus, but usually anything from 60% upwards, some 60% of the population to have it. And then the virus can fizzle out because it can't find enough susceptible people. Right. And sometimes you need 80, 90% herd immunity, measles, for it to fizzle out and not to be an issue until you get an occasional outbreak somewhere. But that's how it works. So the Swedish approach may well, when they reach 60% herd immunity, which will probably be by the end of May, I mean, that'll be the only country in the world. If you want to go traveling somewhere, Stockholm might well be, if you haven't had coronavirus, the safest place to go come the summer, because it's weird to think, but one country will be potentially in a completely different place to other countries. And only in a year's time we'll be able to reflect back and think, was that the right approach? But I think once you've taken the other track, it's very difficult politically to backtrack.
So if I'm, obviously I'm not a politician, and I'm not like if I'm just Joe, Michael, just trotting along with my life, do you have a recommendation? It's like, obeying whatever laws I need to obey. Am I better off just living my life as best I can, or am I better off hiding and not coming out until they figure this all out?
I think for each of us, let's say in countries that aren't Sweden, where essentially we're coming out of lockdown, I think people are going to have to come to some kind of personal peace with the notion that it's impossible to live your life, or virtually impossible,
Yeah.
for the next months or maybe up to a year by trying to secure yourself and isolate yourself away from any risk in other people. And in some ways, it might be easier to come to that peace or peace of mind with the three principles understanding of how the mind works, or if that's how you experience life, that I need to carry on living my life, and what happens, happens. And that doesn't mean you don't care about what happens. It doesn't mean you're not worried that you or your family, you won't have a genuine concern for if you or your family catches it and how ill they might be. But I think ultimately we're going to have to come to peace with it. So, you, me, that we go about our business, our lives sensibly, being pragmatic, but trying not to let it rule our lives. And it may well be that we catch it, or family members do, and you hope that you won't get it severely. But I think that's the place we'll all get. I think we'll all get to the Sweden place eventually, but our economies, many countries' economies, will have been destroyed along the way with all the health and financial impacts of that. That's the difference. I think we'll all end up in that Sweden situation, but most countries will have gone a long way around to get there. That's my sense.
Right. So I'm going to say a sentence that I probably would bet I've never said before. Let's move to something lighter, like the mental health of the youth.
Yeah.
So where are you at? Because when I last talked to you, I think you just done a new 2-book or 3-book deal for the series.
So yes, this has been really exciting. So I have a 4-book deal for this new series for middle grade, that's age 10 to 15-year-old children with Crown House. The series is called Don't Doubt the Rainbow. And the first book, which is called The 5 Clues, comes out in March. Nice. And this is a detective adventure series primarily centered around a 13-year-old British girl called Edie Marvel, you're right, who in the first book discovers a year after her mother's death, that she thought was an accident, that it wasn't an accident. And her mother was a human rights investigator. She was looking into a violation of human rights. And her mother has left her alone, a series of 5 clues, which she has to unravel in order to both help her come to terms with the grief and her mother's death, but also to bring the killers to justice.
Right.
And during the course of this adventure series, the adventure book, her mother had been involved with the 3 principles. And her dad and the family had never taken it very seriously. But they start having a look at that, just gently. It's not didactic or preachy, but they start looking at it. And she starts seeing Edie in experiencing what's happening around her in a different way and learning in a different way about connections between people, about the nature of thought. She discovers clues in moments of clarity in the shower when your consciousness aperture is open. And I've been really excited about using the opportunity of having a fiction series to help share the 3 principles understanding with young people, because I'm the more I am involved in the 3 principles world, the more convinced I am that next generation, that it's so valuable to the next generation with all the mental health problems, but also to set people up, the potentially the best lesson in life ever. And as part of that, of my trying to make sure I articulate well for young people, I did go on the, I think as we talked about before, I did the iHeart training. Now, iHeart is a charity in the UK run by Terry and Brian Rubenstein, who teach 10-week or 10 session programs to young.
I wrote the foreword to Terry's first book. Yes.
So and they run this fantastic program, which is now expanding in UK schools and also taught in about 10 different countries, as I understand, and being translated. There are similar initiatives in the US, the Spark initiative. As well. But as part of that, I did the facilitator training, not to be a facilitator, but just to learn how they teach this in schools. And it was absolutely marvelous. There were 25 of us, teachers, policemen, all kinds of people who want to teach this program. all kinds of professionals and others who want to teach this program. And we had as well as all the training, we had the benefit of experiencing, taught by Terry and one of her colleagues, Stacey, the 10 sessions as if we were the class. Right. So I listened to the 10 sessions, experienced, discussed, and it was really groundbreaking. And I've seen the videos of kids who have on their website who have enjoyed and experienced and had these, and it's unbelievably moving. I mean, there's children talking about it being life-changing in so many different ways in relation to depression, anxiety, substance misuse, eating disorders, everything, because everything comes from there. And when I did this course, I really felt, I'm not surprised. This is an extraordinary course.
Now, how have you found, as a writer, so, writer to writer, how have you found the balance of sharing what you want to share about the principles without turning it into a lecture book, with a little bit of story around it? Like, because I know that when I've had two attempts at doing fiction books about the principles, one in business, one in relationships, and that was a constant kind of a challenge as a writer, was trying to find that balance of story and point.
It's an extraordinary, a difficult, and a wonderful challenge. That's how I find it. I've written a number of other books, as you know, both history and philosophy, of public health, medical ethics, academic books, and also one other fiction book previously. This book did not start off as having a 3 principles thread in it. The 5 Clues started off as being a straight detective series. And when I had finished a first draft, I don't know, a couple of years ago, whenever it was, I can't remember how or why it happened, but something came to me. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the direction that I'm being pointed in at the moment. What if I, as a subtext, had something within the book that engendered psychological well-being in children as well as being primarily a hopefully great fun adventure detective book. And then I had to work with that. And it's been through having really good editor and really good people at Crown House steering me, and having to be very careful about not being preachy, because that age group, well, no one, not even adults, no one wants to be preachy.
Nobody likes it, but at that age group, you're not going to.
Nobody likes that. And I suppose the proof will be in the pudding, whether I've got the balance right. It's gentle in book 1, and then I'm trying to, in some ways, you've done similarly in your books, but I'm going to be exploring in even more detail in books 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to use the medium of the fact that they, in the school that she goes to, they're teaching this course in books 2, 3, and 4. Now that makes it even more risky being preachy, because they're going to be getting that. But hopefully the characters, the story, the plot line will be the main theme and not distract people, and they will get something else out of it. But the proof will be in the pudding. I don't know.
So, okay, this just occurred to me, and I don't have to deal with this as much because, of course, fiction's very secondary in my writing, so it's not really where I go. But there's a whole lot of movies and books written before about 2000 that were where a lot of the plot hinged on not being able to make a phone call because there was no phone nearby. Or the payphone, I didn't have quarters for the payphone, or they couldn't get, and then suddenly all of those things became just silly. Now, has it begun to impact the writing that the world in which the characters are is a pre-pandemic world?
Well, I mean, that's an interesting question, because when the pandemic hit at the end of March, I had a mild panic because what I haven't told you is the human rights investigation in book 1 that the mother was looking into, who works for a human rights organization, is something with a pharmaceutical. I don't want to give all the story away.
We'll supply our copies, we promise.
A pharmaceutical company that have been genetically manipulating a virus, an influenza virus, in order to make it more virulent, to create better antiviral drugs. And there is a mini outbreak in it. And that's what, very small, a few people, and that's what the mother was investigating. Now, when coronavirus hit, I thought, oh my God, oh my gosh, how can I, how can this be placed now in my book? Because we're in a different world now. Do you mention coronavirus? Do you not mention it? You can't. I can't reset it in a world where everyone's in lockdown, else you wouldn't be able to do effective work. And it's interesting they were very clear, the publishers and the editors, and they're people who work in children's fiction a lot, which is that children's fiction books tend to be what children are getting out of it are themes of humanity. So the stories, the good stories, if you like, that you read are about issues to do with the human condition, and those are perennial. They don't change. It doesn't change because there's been a pandemic. Those issues about how you operate in the face of grief with a parent dying, about how you navigate stress and distress at school, they're still there. About whether you tell friends or don't tell friends secrets, those are all still there. And they advised me not to worry too much about it. They said the coronavirus outbreak will go eventually, and they're right, it will do. And people will return to their lives. We hope it's in a better world, not one that everyone reverts to what they're doing before and destroying the planet. But that people will revert to what they're doing. And those issues for children about growing up, experiencing, learning, emotional challenges exist and will continue to exist. And it's obviously set in a pre-coronavirus world. All will have to be.
Yeah. So this is a hell of a question, but we're getting to that point where we're going to finish soon. So I may as well get it in. Like, what's your fondest hope for that reimagined future? Like that post-pandemic possibility?
I hope that it is a game changer in terms of people's, in the Western world in particular, the people's experience of life and experience of what's important in life and in care for the planet. I hope and pray that the environmental destruction and climate change that has been wreaked on this planet, we don't just revert to what we've been doing before, which is, again, from a three principles understanding, is all driven in the West by insecurities and desires for material comforts and all those external things that we all feel we need to make ourselves happy. When you know that really those things don't make your well-being is not dependent on those. But that is that's the big driver for climate change and planetary destruction, is how we live our lives in the Western world. And I hope that we don't return to that people can see that. We can see it now in the lack of air pollution in Los Angeles, in Beijing. It's absolutely extraordinary that people can see that and act on it, not just speak, not just words. Greta Thunberg and her colleagues are really taken seriously, and it's a game changer. And I think that would be my hope. And that does come, that would need to come with some kind of spiritual awakening for people about the material nature of the lives we live.
Well, I was in a conversation with an economist who hopefully will join me for one of these in the next month or two, and he was saying that his hope for the principles is that it sort of can transcend the boundaries a bit, that it's equally relevant and acceptable regardless of political ideology, regardless of religious ideology. It cuts through that because it's before that. It's something that's just true before the individual differences. And I mean, that's why I write the books I do. I know that's why you do a lot of the work that you do.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely believe that. I've experienced that firsthand through my global health work. It's been extraordinary to me working in many countries, rich and poor, across the world, Pakistan, Sierra Leone. The three principles. It transcends. It absolutely transcends, and your understanding permeates and has relevance because we're all human beings, no matter where we are in the globe. So I think you put that beautifully, and I would agree with that. And I hope that there is a greater understanding and awareness of that in the world we'll be looking at next year.
Professor Anthony Kessel, it's been a delight as always. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks so much. Cheerio.